Thank you for the introduction again. So it's a pleasure to be here talking about SplineDist today. So SplineDist works on the objective of doing instant segmentation in bioimages. By instant segmentation, I mean the task of partitioning the image into individual objects. Now, getting individual instances out of the bioimages is really helpful in doing a variety of tasks, such as quantification of morphology, protein expression, doing some cell tracking. Now, in the recent years, there have been some quite cool methods for doing instant segmentations in bioimages, such as StarDist, Mutex watershed, cell pose, so on and so forth. Among these, StarDist has come up in the MICAI 2018. This is a supervised method to do instant segmentation by using star-convex polygon as a shape model. With its excellent performance comparing to the state-of-the-art methods, it has been quite popular in the community, and it does have a growing user base. Studies also has a well-developed Git repository. Already there have been quite a few works which have utilized StarDist in advanced applications in biology. So let's have a look on how StarDist works. So for a given shape, StarDist models its contour as a star-convex polygon of R vertices for every single pixel contained in the object. So what I mean by that is that for every pixel ij, for instance, over here inside the object, StarDist constructs the contour as a star-convex polygon of R vertices by tracing a set of radial distances to the contour of the same object at R fixed equidistant angles. Now, what is star convexity or star convex polygon? I'll come to it in a bit. Before that, let's have a look at the loss construction of StarDist for every pixel. Well, it can be realized that these set of radial distances, which are the backbone of the StarDist method, are not defined for the background pixels. So what StarDist does is it also considers an object probability per pixel. So this object probability is defined as the normalized distance to the nearest background pixel. So the advantage of having this extra quantity in the loss is not only during the inference, this object probability is going to help ignoring the object proposals that is gonna come from the background pixels. Also during the training, it will help regularizing the loss computed over the set of distances. So this entire training loss for StarDist is composed of two parts. The first part is a binary cross entropy loss over the ground truth and the predicted object probability, while the second part is over the radial distances, which is again composed of two parts. The first part is mean absolute error loss, weighted by the ground truth object probability, while this second part gets activated for background pixels and provides regularization. This lambda 1 and lambda 2 are further two regularization factor, which aids in stabilization of the training. So StarDist uses an encoder-decoder architecture for predicting star-convex polygons for every pixel. So for the paper, the authors has used UNIT for this task, but since this is a very modular way of handling, one can very well use their favorite encoder-decoder scheme. Well, as mentioned, StarDist predicts one object probability and R distances per pixel. It obtains the final set of object instances by doing a non-maximum suppression over all the object proposals generated. Also considers the object probabilities. Now, the base assumption of the success of StarDist is the given shape needs to be of star convex so that StarDist is able to model it. So we can call a shape star convex if it satisfies the requirement that it has to contain at least one point inside the shape from which one can trace on a straight line to all the points on the boundary without going out of the object. such as this one on the screen. From this point inside, it's very much possible to reach the points on the contour without getting out of the object. But for a shape like this, which does not contain any point inside itself, which would satisfy this star convex requirement, StarDist would fail to get a good shape approximation. Now, that is very much as expected. So StarDist remains bounded by this particular restriction that the objects in the input images needs to have a star convex shape. So to overcome that exact restriction, we have designed SplineDist, where instead of modeling the objects as star-convex polygons, we design the shape model using more flexible parametric spline curve model. So it becomes able to perform segmentation irrespective of the star convexity of the input shapes. Further, we also show that SplineDist becomes able to generate equivalent segmentation results with smaller number of model parameters. So as mentioned, in SplineDist, we use 2D parametric spline curves as the object model, which is mathematically defined over here. The parameters of these models are a set of two-dimensional points, which we call as control points, and the number of control points and the type of the spline kernel or spline basis. So for the construction of the model, the object models in SplineDist, we fix m, the number of control points, and phi, the type of spline basis. We generally consider polynomial b-spline as phi for these cases. So the remaining parameters for this model, which one can change, are these control points. So which can be anywhere in the image to model the given shape. So for an image given for a given shape like this, what one can do to model that to figure out where exactly in the grid you need to place these control points that would be able to model the input shape. So since there are no more restriction on where these control points needs to be, the spline model can very well model non-star convex shapes, which was not prior possible for the StarDist object model by definition. So what SplineDist does is it's for every single analogous to StarDist, for every single pixel, it predicts a set of control points. And we express these control points in relative coordinates with respect to the particular pixel that it is getting from in polar form. And this construction is more flexible than the star convex construction in StarDist because since we predict both the radii and the angle, the control points can be anywhere on the grid to model the given shape, no matter whether it's star convex or not. So what is very crucial to note over here is the shape parameters that we are getting out of the network are a bunch of control points. And using that control points, what we get is a continuous description of the contour. But the ground truth that we need to use to train the model are a bunch of discrete pixel masks, right? So what I want to say that these ground truths are a bunch of pixel values living on a discrete grid. Since we have this continuous description, what we have to do, we have to obtain a discrete representation out of this continuous representation. So since we have this unique advantage of our shape model being continuous, we can very well sample it at any arbitrary precision. And we are able to do it in a differentiable manner to perform backpropagation on it, which is pretty cool. Now, the other reason that we need to construct this discrete contour out of the continuous representation that we get is the set of control points that one can generate to model a shape is not unique. You can very well obtain another set of control points that could model the shape, the same shape. So having the loss on the control points or the continuous representation doesn't make much sense, because there would be multiple solution for the same shape. So we in the loss, we, instead of considering directly the continuous representation that we get out of the network, we generate the discrete representation out of it. So, like StarDist, it also again is composed. The intertering loss is composed of two parts. First, like StarDist, it also constructs an object probability, and we perform a binary cross entropy loss over that. And the second part of the loss compares between the ground truth discrete contour and the predicted contour that we get out of discretizing the continuous representation from the control points representation. So again, it performs a L1 loss between the ground truth contour and the predicted contour, and for the background pixels, it considers regularization over the predicted contour. And we also again use two more regularization factors, lambda 1 and lambda 2, to provide additional regularization for the stability. So major difference between the StarDist and the SplineDist is we no more require to have unique ground truths for every single pixel, because for every single pixels, the ground truth is going to be the same contour, right? So that we can very well achieve by shifting our predicted contour in terms of relative coordinates to remain computationally tractable and do efficient ground truth generation. And the architecture is we keep it similar as StarDist for fair comparison. Again, you can very well use encoder, your favorite encoder and decoder scheme, but just for the sake of comparison, for the rest of this presentation and in our paper as well, we use UNet as the backbone. So the part that is different from the StarDist is, if you remember, apart from the object probability, StarDist was predicting our disk set of radii, while for SplineDist, for m control points, we need to predict twice of that, since it's we need to get the two-dimensional coordinates for all the control points. So to evaluate the efficiency of this particular method, we designed a synthetic dataset of 500 images, and that consists of mostly star-convex and a couple of non-star convex objects randomly placed around. The reason we didn't go for completely a dataset consisting of simply non-star convex objects, because we didn't want the SplineDist to network to just learn a non-star convex objects, and so we could still do a fair comparison that StarDist can still converge, since there are some star convex shapes present, and we do not explicitly ask SplineDist to learn how to present just the non-star convex objects. What we note are quite interesting observations that for StarDist, when there is a very obvious non-star convex shape objects, it tends to either break it in multiple instances, like it does for this particular object. It is breaking it in two different instances, and also sometimes it simply ignores one part of the object. Like if you can see, like for this particular object, it's simply ignoring one part of the arm. And when you for the illustration that you see here, we used linear B-spline and cubic B-spline as the interpolation kernel, and we have kept the number of control points 32 for the first one and 8 for the second one. And what we note that using much lesser parameters in terms in cubic B-spline, it's still cubic spline it still be able to get a good shape approximation even for those non-star convex objects. And the metrics mentioned in the bottom are the object-wise intersection over union coefficients for the entire image averaged over the objects present. So what we see that the cubic spline list and when you compare between the results that we obtain using the linear spline list and the cubic spline list, what we see that the cubic one actually managed to achieve quantitatively almost equivalent results using 4 times less amount of model parameters. And on top of that, it also introduces less amount of noise in comparison with the linear one. And we also compare it in the benchmark dataset of the Data Science Bowl 2018 nuclei dataset. What we note here that as we keep on increasing the number of points, so by number of points here, I mean the number of radii for StarDist and the number of control points for SplineDist. So what we note here is as it increases at certain points, the results of StarDist and the SplineDist starts to converge. But at the very beginning, owing to the fact that the SplineDist is using a much smoother interpolation kernel than StarDist, it gets at least quantitatively better results at using 25% less parameters. But when the number of parameter gets more than 12, you can notice that there is a slight performance degradation in the SplineDist result in comparison to StarDist. But that could be owed to the fact using that many model parameters, it introduces a bit of shape degeneration in terms of the noise. So we have tested and we have also got results from the crowd participants who have used SplineDist in their own dataset, and it can be seen that SplineDist performs quite well across different modalities, across different datasets for tracking as well, where it computes tracking using TrackMate and SplineDist. The object proposals are being generated using SplineDist. So how can you use SplineDist? We have a Git repo which also provides a couple of useful notebooks for walkthroughs. If you want to have a look under the hood in the machinery, then this is the starting point that you would perhaps like to use. But for a low-cost entry point, I would like to recommend the amazing work that zero-cost deal for MIC people have been doing, where they are generating collab notebooks exhibiting different computer vision pipelines for bioimages. They have recently done a notebook for SplineDist, and as a low-cost entry point for someone who is not very interested to understand the machinery rather than just to obtain some results, this is a very good starting point. So the take-home messages from this talk is what we get, what we propose is a modification over StarDist. Unlike StarDist, where it models the object in terms of star-convex polygons, here we do it in terms of planar parametric spline curves. And unlike StarDist, we are no more limited by the restriction that the objects will have to be star-convex. And you can also see that SplineDist manages to produce equivalent good segmentation results with fewer network parameters, irrespective of what kind of objects that the dataset contains. So a note of acknowledgement goes towards the Uhlmann group and also towards the StarDist team and the zero cost deal for MIC team for all their helpful advice and the discussions. And thanks to you for listening.
Thank you, Sumal. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. Soham, I had a couple of questions while others are. I see there's a couple of questions already coming in, so I'll take those first. Can you take statistical comparisons between shapes? And the example given is comparing the same shape across time points or comparing shapes from a control versus treatment. This comes from Ryan.
Well, the result that you get out of SplineDist is a continuous representation of the object contour, and you can very well do a bit of shape analysis using that. So even though we haven't yet done for this work, but I would assume you can very well do a bit of shape comparison using the results that you get out of SplineDist.
So downstream of the current pipeline that you have.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Okay, so I have a couple of questions, and perhaps there will be others in the meantime. I really enjoyed that, and very much enjoyed it when you first introduced this. It's a great kind of improvement on the StarDist, which is already pretty cool. I'm wondering about 3D segmentation and what the challenges are there. Have you tried already to deploy this on 3D data sets, and what kind of problems and challenges you have found there if you've tried it already?
Well, frankly speaking, we haven't yet started designing the SplineDist 3D one, but that's very much in our to-do list. But I can already envision the spline model that we would need for the 3D segmentation would not be as straightforward as this, because that itself brings tons of challenges to put in such kind of pipelines. So I do not have a very concrete answer for you yet, but I assume there would be quite an amount of challenge to do in terms of 3D.
Okay. Okay. In the meantime, there's one more question from Humed Botaev. What are the limitations of SplineDist in terms of object shapes it can segment? Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Well, mathematically none, but since you can, given enough control points mathematically, you can very well represent any kind of shape that you throw at it. But practically speaking, I do not have a very good I'm not quite sure how to put it into words, but something that has like tons of spiky shape, and that might be a bit tricky to segment with SplineDist as of now. But as I mentioned, this is not a problem for the object model. This is rather a problem for the backbone. So if it's possible to get good shape, like good embedding out of the image, then the spline model can very well tackle any kind of shape. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. One question that always comes up whenever we talk about pre-trained deep learning models is people are kind of curious about how much data was required to train such a model. I wonder if you could comment on that a little bit. For the model that you ship, the standard model that you ship with SplineDist, how much data was required? And the other thing is there a way to retrain or do transfer learning on that model?
So for the first one, the results that you are seeing over here, where we compare between StarDist and SplineDist directly on the DSP18, we use the curated dataset that StarDist provides in its repository. I think it contains around 450 annotated images. So that should be a good starting point. And we haven't done transfer learning as of the current state in SplineDist, but it should be very straightforward.
Okay. Very well. Let me see if there's anything else that came in. Oh, Vitaly has a question here. Would it be possible? Would it be possible to segment accurately when cells touch each other, and the labeling will be primarily located at the plasma membrane, or rather than a cytoplasmic label, as the ones that are illustrating now on the slide?
Well, I assume something like this. So technically, when if the instance you can have instances for every single labeled instances for every single objects, then I would assume it should give you a decent shape approximation even for touching objects.
Right. I guess the second part of the question was if the label itself is not homogeneous across the cell, but it's just a boundary. It has just rings, basically, looking at the cell membrane alone.
I'm not quite sure what to answer to that, but that should be fine. If I mean, for those kind of annotations, I would assume it's possible to get an instance masks. So yeah, I mean, if that's possible, then it should not be a problem. But I guess that would vary from case to case.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to check it out, and perhaps it would need a little bit of additional training data that actually has the outlines as input to the model. But yeah, thank you so much, Soham Mandal from the EMBL EBI. Really appreciate your contribution to the AI Microscopy Symposium. This is the 3rd edition. Thank you for contributing. I think everybody enjoyed your presentation.